Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, how real-time field updates are helping operators make data-driven decisions. Today, you have myself, Harrison Bedford, coming to you from W Energy, and we're joined by Shrivan Kamdar, also with W Energy, our Director of Product Management. If we can go to the next slide, we'll just do a little bit by way of an introduction for us. Shrivan has worked in a number of industries, from oil and gas and chemical fertilizers to biotech and pharmaceuticals. Worked for ExxonMobil for a number of years in several roles, from environmental advisor, process engineer, all the way through to risk management. And since 2014, he's been working with Seven Lakes Technology and W Energy, focusing on business efficiency solutions for the doers of the oil and gas industry. And then myself, I'm the product marketing manager for W Energy. I've got over 10 years of experience working with customers, from leading multiple implementation projects, working with stakeholders internally and externally on multiple modules of the W Energy platform, and working with customers to just ensure that the W Energy platform is tailored to their business needs. So, Shrivan, appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you.
Right. I think we will look at our agenda here. So we're going to start by kind of assessing, what we typically see in the marketplace and what we see out in the field with operations groups. We'll talk a little bit about several different solutions, from a field data gathering platform, a field service management solution, talk a little bit about allocations that are going to benefit from those first two solutions I mentioned. We'll start to wrap it up by looking at the holistic value proposition of what these tools can offer to customers that are implementing those. We'll touch a few minutes on some customer value stories of some real life examples from customers of how they've been able to improve their businesses, and then we'll wrap it up and have a little bit of Q&A here at the end. So I think with that, we can jump in to the content. All right, so Shrivan, we have here, everyone's familiar with this. We've got a pump jack in the field. We've all seen that site. We have a number of icons here. Can you just describe a little bit about what the representation is in this picture, and then how that translates to what you're seeing in the field with operators out there?
Yeah, so this is just an attempt at showing what the operator, or sometimes the field technician, sees in the oil and gas field, right? So ideally, you want them to have maybe a phone or something easy to maneuver, and his wrench or whatever his tool is to go out and fix what he needs to fix and run what he needs to run. However, in reality, what we see is there's a lot of point solutions out there, a lot of customized solutions out there. These icons just represent various versions that we've seen. There's a lot more, but to do your maintenance entries, you got to go into SAP or Oracle or Infort or some Microsoft customization. To do your data capture, you have your production data capture. If your foreman wants certain reports, you're typing stuff into Excel. You're maybe looking at Power BI reports. If you need to fill out forms, there's form building software that's out there that you're looking at. And then the multitude of customizations also, whether it's access databases or other things. So now what that does is it clutters up the field person's mind trying to administratively maneuver through different interfaces on different devices at different times of day, and it just slows down what they're actually hired to do and their core competence that you've hired them for. So that's one of the biggest problems we see in terms of technology. Trying to be married to the field is it's not the best marriage when it looks like this.
For sure. I think one of the things that kind of a couple of things that come to mind just thinking about this is the number of nodes and decision points that those operators have just really expands exponentially as they go throughout their day. And one of the other things too, just for the audience to keep in mind, is as you're looking at tools like this and solutions for improving your operational capabilities, my perspective, and Shrivan, you can tell me if you agree, is really taking an inventory of what do you have, what tools are out there, what capabilities are even being spread that there may be things out there that customers aren't fully aware of that that operators are tools that they're interacting with?
Yeah. So you obviously want, something for the person in the field that is, like I said, easy to maneuver, and the last mile delivery is on one interface, one device, ideally one program. And we did the math on these scenarios versus what the difference is. If you have 4 people asking an operator to do 8 things, and they have to work with 4 different systems across, say, 2 or 3 or 4 different interfaces, turn around on those same interfaces, make the updates along those different devices. The mental mass that the person has to juggle, or the amount of cognitive nodes that he has to jump through to do 8 things, is about over 6,000, right? So that's a lot of mental brain drain that you're spending just trying to figure out where you need to update information for what you're trying to get done. Versus if you can get it all on one application and one device, those same 8 things for those 4 people can be done, with as little as 32 mental jumps. 32 still sounded like a lot to me when I saw the math, but compared to 6,000, that's still 99.9%, less. So it's a huge difference, and it can make a big difference in the field for your end users in terms of them being mentally fresh and prepared for conversations like a JSA, which might involve really understanding and putting your brain to work in terms of what are the safety risks involved here, and what do I need to think about versus how quickly can I finish this paperwork in this application or that.
Yeah, Shrivan, 32 does sound like a lot, but it's a lot better than over 6,000, and you can't improve on 32 until you get there. So yeah, it's quite the drastic improvement for sure. Right. I think on the next slide, one of the things that we see operators whenever they're coming to look for platform efficiencies throughout their operations ecosphere. We see a number of challenges, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list. So if someone out there in attendance has a challenge that's not on here, don't think that we're not aware of it or not actively seeking to improve on that. But Shrivan, are there any of these from the challenges side, or even the responsibilities that they kind of all flow into that that you see either regularly or as really even the most important to call out as we look at some of these reasons for looking for those efficiencies?
Yeah, I think the depending on the industry dynamics and the environment you're operating in, low oil prices, high oil prices, whatever that is, your levers to run the business will change, but the responsibilities still stay the same, right? You're there to extract energy out of the ground. You're there to have a strategy where you can make a margin. So you have to keep your costs low and your revenue above your costs, depending on low pricing environments. And in a high price environment, that's your time to really make the money and fill up the bank. But you need to do all that while ensuring all your guys go home safe. They're accountable for the individual tasks that underpin your strategy, and that you're complying with all the environmental regulations, right? So the key is you're not going to be able to, control the geopolitical challenges and whatnot, right? Those are what they are. You have very little control, except for going to industry meetings and giving your opinion on new regulations that might come out. So depending on what OPEC does and what regulations come out, and what the things you can control, what is it that you can control? So that again is your production, how to keep your costs low, your revenue high, and making everybody safe. Now underlying all of that is a series, almost a beehive of activities that goes on in the oil field. Whether you're doing drilling and completions, whether you're running a well, you're maintaining a well, you're sending out dispatches, you're flying drones over your field to understand where your leaks are. All of that has to have a nice closed loop. Otherwise, what often happens is activities get started and you don't know when they're being done, or activities can start and you might not know that they've started. You might be dispatching things to vendors and not knowing, how much you're being billed. So all of those finer details are very important to face these challenges, overcome these challenges, and meet those three responsibilities that are there on the left.
That makes a lot of sense, and I really love what you said there about having a closed loop for all that information that you're gathering, because it's one thing to, capture it somewhere, but it's another thing to actually take all of that information and be able to see it, review it, and make some decisions, find where those efficiencies can live. You've got to have both sides of the coin. All right, I think we will jump into our first kind of platform discussion here, talking about a little bit of the field data gathering solution. One of the things that we really find interesting is capturing how time is spent in the field. Typically whenever you may not have an efficient set of operations, and while these are certainly not necessarily the end all be all of how everyone breaks out their time. Shrivan, can you just chat a little bit about how you see these applying in for lease operators, and how an FDG or field data gathering tool can help improve some of this?
Yeah, so again, a lot of these are anecdotal data points. So if anybody has better numbers out there, definitely trust those. But the main point that we're trying to illustrate here is, ideally, if you look at the responsibilities we talked about on the page before, you're there to extract energy out of the ground, and a lot of times that's going to involve optimizing, maintaining, troubleshooting, and so you want to hopefully less monitoring, as long as especially if it's a lot of it's automated. But where are you spending your human resource time per week or per day or per hour, right? So we've got a breakdown here, but ideally what you want to do is you want to remove that administrative burden as much as possible, because a quarter of the field's time, from what we've seen, is often spent doing administrative work, whether that's taking down data and readings on a sheet of paper, transferring them to an Excel sheet or a production tool, and then emailing stuff in or syncing stuff in at the end of the day, getting calls from the production accounts the next morning on what's wrong because the data wasn't clean, validated, something got missed, and then redoing all of that. And now all of that takes away time from optimizing or monitoring key things that may impact production, maintaining wells that need to be maintained for keeping production up, excuse me, and then troubleshooting the problems of the day, right? So you want to be able to focus on those buckets rather than the administrative bucket. So we've been able to see reductions of that 25%, which then flow over usually to maintenance and troubleshooting, sometimes to monitoring and operation optimization. But we're able to get that 25%, down to in the 5-10% range, which is ideally where you want to be. Ideally, you should be at 0, but probably never get rid of it completely. So
Yeah.
That extra 10, 15, or even 20% bump to perform maintenance and troubleshooting, monitoring, and optimization is great. Then the next challenge comes up is, well, you have a lot more time and resource to work on stuff. What is it that you work on, and how do you figure out where to spend your newly found resources, and how do you invest them?
That's right, sure. And I think as we go to the next slide, we see a little bit of some of the just kind of an example video of some of the capabilities, and really how that minimizes the off system administrative work that you have to do with a tool like this. What are some of the things you see as far as maybe tasks happening off the books, as far as not off the books, but they're happening and then it's a while before they hit the books, tracking that vendor spend? How do you see some of those kind of cost implications really come out of what you're able to do and take advantage of with an application like this?
Yeah, so I'll talk about both sides in terms of how it impacts the back office and eventually the work processes in the back office, and eventually the bottom line. So what we're seeing here is more of field data capture side. And you have your well tests, your run tickets, your well readings, tank readings, gauges, whatnot. So you have all of that now in the palm of your hand. So rather than waiting to come back home and entering it on the laptop, or I've even seen instances where operators have given the data book to their family members, and they have their spouse or their teenage daughter entering these things into their old 20-year-old Panasonic Tough book or whatever it is. And so you can imagine the amount of data errors that there are, because you're entering it late, you're entering it without context, maybe somebody else is entering it, and now the next day, the production accountants are going to be, trying to fight those fires and then calling you to fix that data. So on one side, we have this field data gathering application, which helps, getting everything entered right then and there, because you're not waiting to open up your big old laptop and VPN into some system. It's all right there where you can have it in the field and enter everything. Everything syncs to the cloud. Everything's validated. So you have much better, cleaner data coming in. So that's on the accounting side, where data accuracy is super important. On the flip side, some of the stuff you mentioned in terms of the maintenance work. So now that you're saving this time, you have this time to do maintenance. What we've seen on the maintenance side is there's a lot of tasks that are often happening, especially contract labor tasks, where you're getting a vendor to do it, and you don't really find out how much you've spent or what they've done until the invoices hit accounting close, a month later, right? And what you're able to do on, with the tool like this on the field service side is be able to track in real time what's going on, who it's going to, when it starts, when it gets done, prioritizing and comparing one field task versus another, and seeing everything in one picture with all parties, right? Maintenance planners, ops supervisors, foremen, field coordinators, even your vendors, and most of all, even the lease operator can see everything that he or she may have requested on their mobile app in terms of, hey, I need this E&I panel changed on well XYZ, and I'm waiting for a pump test on this central tank battery. They're able to monitor all of that rather than just hoping somebody shows up and fixes it one day. They have more control to impact their own P&L and ask questions about it, right? So those are just some of the things that we've seen. We've seen a lot. I think one might come up later in one of the slides, but I know one of the things that stood out was one of the customers had mentioned a 300% increase in the visibility of contract labor expenses and work.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Yeah, it's just amazing the capabilities of kind of insights and information you can gather when you have tools kind of like this. So so if we have FDG, a field data gathering app that really automates that capabilities, and as we move into the next slide, and you've touched on that a little bit of with a tool like a field service manager, being able to take that time that you've saved and really increase in a matter of at least these 4 areas that we've got on screen here, surely others. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen these types of things impact, or what you've seen from customers as far as, okay, I've saved all this time, now how do I know what to do, when to do it, how to do it?
Yeah, so number one is you're usually freeing up that administrative time that we talked about earlier, right? Getting from 25% to 10%, 5%. So now you have more time for productive work. So what a lot of operators are thinking is, okay, what do we do? We have a quarter of an extra person now that's available across the entire field. Multiply that by how many people you have. So you've essentially increased your workforce by 15, 20% or whatever it might be without hiring anybody. Then you can upskill those people. So I've seen a lot of operators be able to add what they call floaters, or specialists, where they're trained on a higher level of skill sets and certifications, where they may be able to take on tasks, repair fixes and maintenance jobs, which you otherwise might have hired a contract labor for. So you're able to save that, and you're able to have a higher skilled workforce, right? But now that they're able to do more stuff, that can also be a dangerous thing, right? Because I remember one of the customers had mentioned, hey, once they were able to free up that time, they saw a 70% increase in the amount of parts picked up from their warehouse to do work in the field. Okay, well, but then the question came up is, how do we know we're doing the right work, right? It's nice that our own guys are doing it. We're definitely saving money, but how do we know we're doing the right work, and how do we know when it's getting done, and is it being done at the right time? Is it needed? So, and then if they are doing work, like, can they do other work that we're currently outsourcing to vendors, and then, have vendors do lower cost work, right? Or something like that. So now you have all of these questions in terms of optimizing a whole new problem that you only wished you could have had before, but now you do have it. So
Yeah.
having a system like an FSM helps with that, is you're able to see everything together and decide, hey, we just upscaled John. Why don't we give him this stuff? We no longer have to give that to Schlumberger or Halliburton or, whoever it might be. And, we'll give the vendors different tasks. And the nice thing is you're able to even see what your vendors are going to be doing, which vendors are doing what tasks. Maybe you have, contracts with them, which incentivizes you to pick one vendor versus another, or you have data that says this vendor works better than this one. They get it done better, faster, cheaper, or better and faster, but it's worth the extra money, whatever it might be, right? And all of that with the relative priority rankings of everything, because you can actually plug in which wells are worth more, which wells have a safety impact, an environmental impact, what risks are we trying to reduce, what's going to be better for margins. All of that can be weighed against each other in one single stack ranking, and just gives you a better picture of the overall operations of your field, and how to manage it versus some things in SAP and some things in an Excel sheet and some things in Microsoft Teams chat. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, that's that as with anything, whenever you have an improvement in one area, you're going to uncover a problem, like you said, of, hey, I've got this time, how do I know what to do with it? So having a tool, and I think on the next slide or two, we've got some kind of example screenshots of some of the capabilities that we have around the field service management platform, and how it works. And you can see mobile app as well. So it's again that single pane of glass where folks are able to work. So it's kind of creating a better problem, but we're also able to see, and suggest and say, hey, here's a way to solve that new problem that you didn't know you had, and like you said, you could only have wished that you had that problem to solve before. So pretty intuitive there. So just to kind of pause here, we've talked a little bit about field data gathering, field data capture, and how improvements we can see there. We've seen, okay, what can we do with that save time, that those capabilities that now we can bring in-house. That leads me to think that that's only going to improve the back office capabilities. So starting to think on the next slide, as the field gets more efficient, that's only going to lead to the production accounting team. Surely they're going to see the downstream impacts of that as well. Can you talk a little bit about how their days improve because of improved operations in the field through a couple of different solutions for them?
Yeah, so right off the back, just by using the field solution, the data is coming in throughout the day and more clean and more validated. So that reduces their 8 a.m. firefighting that production accounting often has to go through. The other thing is, if the production accounting software that is part of the our production offering has real-time allocations. So what does that mean? That means if, let's say, you have a network in the field, an allocation network, and you have 3 or 4 tanks, a well, and 2 or 3 meters, and as the operator goes out, or if SCADA is collecting the data, either or, once the data for that day is in, the allocation system for production accounting automatically knows that, hey, this network is completed, all the data is in. So it's going to start allocating based on the meters or the last well test, whatever the methodology you have chosen and set up. It's going to start allocating in real time as soon as that data is completed. So if the lease operator started his day at 8 a.m., I'd say at 8:52 he's done with this battery and all the data's come in, whether it's manually entered or from SCADA. By 8:53, the production accounting person can actually see the results of that part of the network. And similarly, as the lease operators go throughout their day, the networks of the whole company are just allocated as you go and as you go. So you're able to see whether there's any issues throughout the day of, whether any data got missed, or whether maybe some numbers don't look right because maybe we don't have a recent well test, whatever it might be. But they're able to then work with the operations folks in near real time while they're still within a mile of that battery, to figure out, hey, do we need to, recheck some data or something, versus, in traditional systems, production accounting kind of cross their fingers, prays for the best, goes home, the allocations run through the night, and they come in the next morning, and then that's when you see all the errors, right? So if, you no longer have to wait for that type of a scenario, you can just kind of see all the exceptions throughout the day and fix them near real time. So that, then that kind of, feeds the loop again, because now in the next morning, you don't have that firefighting and call back to the field. So, okay, the field's not getting those calls. So what do? Well, they have that much more time to do less administrative work and more optimization, maintenance, troubleshooting. So it just kind of keeps feeding the loop, and that reduces the cost in the field or increases the revenue by reducing the downtime of the field. So you're essentially expanding your margin.
That's really powerful stuff there. And I think on the next slide, we have just kind of an example of what does an allocation network look like. And depending on the size of your monitor, you can see that there's actually production overlay on that graphic. So you can see on your allocation network, you can see the results in there. You're not stuck looking at just a spreadsheet or a grid of data trying to view that information. You're able to see it as it actually exists in the field. And yeah, I can only imagine just how excited you and the team make those production accountants whenever they can see, hey, I can get those those allocations done in real time. If I've got issues, it's quick to redo those. You don't have to wait another 24 hours to run those allocations or to get that information in. So that's got to be big movement for customers whenever they're able to come off of a legacy system and be able to see a lot of this in real time allocation capabilities.
Yeah, I don't want to make this about the technology. The conversation is more about the business value, but one of the drivers of that business value is the technology, and that this being on the cloud and using the latest technology stack, we are able to run these allocations in seconds or sometimes sub-seconds. So the traditional method is running everything in batch overnight. Here you're getting it pretty fast, and I know the view that's being shown here is a network, to kind of give a visual of what I was talking about. But the way it would most likely be looked at, and there's another view in the application, which has your most typical exceptions kind of highlighted in a dashboard view, like negative values on a battery and things like that, or large differences from recent production values. So there's different ways to look at that, but quicker ways to find those exceptions and drill down. But you could also look at it on a battery by battery, if you're starting to troubleshoot, like what it shows here.
Yeah, that's a great call out too, because you have more time to figure out those exceptions and those issues, whether they're in something on the allocation network or from the field. So just having that available time can only prove beneficial to folks. So as we go to the next slide, To kind of take a pause, look back a little bit about some of the topics that we've discussed today. So, you know, taking a 30,000 foot view, so to speak, of what does having automated field capture, a field service management tool to come off of that, and then what accounting efficiencies are you seeing? We're really able to see that with having that real-time data, you're able to decrease your administrative time, which by all intents and purposes is going to increase the time that you have to be productive. Which everyone is obviously always looking for, how can we squeeze a little bit more effort in? How can we get a little bit more done? As operators are running lean, having that data is powerful. But one of the things is that with that increased productivity time, you want to make sure that you're focused on the highest priority tasks. And, Shrivan, you touched on a handful of things that can be used to rank those high priority tasks, but and surely you're able to address multiples of those just from the fact of, hey, now I've got time, I can go get to the right place, I can see what's something close to me that I can fix before driving further away and having to come back. And then ultimately where those two improvements really lead to is seeing how you can have real-time allocations, and it leads to not only closing the book sooner, but being able to check and figure out those exceptions more quickly. So really kind of a cascading of improved effects whenever you're really looking at a holistic approach to improving your communication and your processes in the field. Shrivan, anything you'd like to add kind of at this holistic view?
No, I think this kind of summarizes it in three-pronged way, right? Like you decrease the administrative time by automating a lot of that field data capture, or at least getting it into a mobile forward way versus an after the fact write it down 3 times kind of way. And then with that time, you're able to attack the core of the business in terms of maintaining your field, not just collecting the data on it. And then in the back office, you're able to hit some of the accounting efficiencies so that you can further free up the field and also be compliant.
Yeah, compliance is definitely a big focus these days as well. I think as we go on to the next slide, before we jump all the way into Q&A, we were just gonna hit on a handful of representative stories. I think a couple of these were mentioned earlier, but Shrivan, you mind walking us through some of these and just kind of the improvements that you've been able to see from and conversations you've had with operators implementing tools like this?
Yeah. So I think I touched on some of them. I talked about the 300% increase in contracted labor visibility. That was just, this company was giving a lot of work to different vendors, and when they brought the vendors also into the system, they were able to see that a lot of these tasks were not really centrally viewable anywhere. So now they had that visibility and were able to be more selective in terms of where they really wanted to spend their money. And then that, going back to the training and the use of internal resources versus vendors, I talked about that. A lot of companies wanting to do that. This obviously helps them, get closer to that if people have that additional time. One interesting one is I had heard that oftentimes the time between a problem being reported in the field and the time for someone to pick up a wrench and go out there and fix it can be up to 4 days, 96 hours. So being able to reduce that to, now, even if you have all the paperwork and everything built into the platform, whether it's your JSAs and your work permits and all of that, this could be from the time something's reported from your mobile app to getting all the paperwork done and getting right back out there to do it. It can be minutes to maybe a couple hours, as long as there's a good plan of attack of what you need to do. But yeah, there's no reason to wait 96 hours to get something done. That's a lot of potential downtime if it's a critical asset. On the, I talked about people pulling more parts from the warehouse. In that case, it was 70%, but on average, if you start becoming more selective in what you do, you can easily see a large increase in your maintenance output versus the administrative work, kind of the first bucket, 3-bucket slide we talked about. But on the IT side, while this is not the biggest value add, but it is, sometimes if you're just trying to justify the initial investment, a lot of times you're able to replace existing technology that you might have. You're spending money on someone to administrate how many different applications, plus the cost of actually paying the annual subscriptions for those applications, whether it's custom built software, some form building software, additional licenses on SAP that your field doesn't use anyway, whatever it might be. But we've seen companies do the analysis and come up with, hey, we may be able to reduce up to 6 software solutions, right? So there's that IT savings, but I think the real savings is, again, going back to the first slide of the presentation, is letting your operator consolidate onto a single pane of glass versus, the cost of your operations people having to look at 6, 7, 8 different applications is going to be way more than what you pay for them. So, both IT and operations side, if you're able to reduce that footprint and give them one easy to use thing, that the value of that is pretty high.
For sure, definitely helping everyone out is never a bad thing. All right, I think now we're going to move into a Q&A portion of the presentation. If anyone has submitted questions, if we don't get to those questions, feel free to reach out to Shrivan or myself to connect with us on those. We also have a QR code there if you're interested to learn a little bit more about some of our upstream solutions, including these we discussed today. You can scan that. And so with that, we will jump into some questions. So the first one here, Shrivan, that came in, it says, similar capabilities are offered by larger companies like an SAP or a Microsoft. How does W Energy compete or compare with those tools with some of the capabilities discussed?
Yeah, so I'm assuming this question is more with respect to the field service side, since that's where SAP and Microsoft and those guys might compete. So we actually had the same question before we built FSM, is when we were asked to add task management to basic field data capture. We said why when all of these solutions exist, and when the operators would show us these solutions, that last mile delivery, they were great backend systems, as most of them are, because they're very behemoth software companies, and they make software for the back office. But when it came to that last mile delivery and an effective mobile application, and for it to work in the field and understand the context of how the field works and what someone needs and how much data someone needs versus what's an overload, all of that context, that last mile delivery, that subject matter expertise was missing in these field side applications. So what we eventually saw was zero field adoption and people being forced to use the back end. And if anybody's ever used the back end of SAP or Oracle, you can imagine, when it's hard enough for field, office folks to use it, and the field is usually just never adopting it. So, that's where we came in. Is we don't obviously go in to replace an SAP PM or an Oracle, but if that back end wants to stay, because that investment's been made, to leverage crossing the financial T's and dotting the financial I's, we often add on and become the field-facing last mile delivery mechanism where the work actually gets done, and then our APIs can talk back to those systems to financially close everything. But that's where we really excel, and we come in, is getting that adoption at the field, because if you don't have the adoption in the field, then chances are it's all garbage in, garbage out, and then all of your dashboards, all of your finances are not going to be looking pretty, and the field's inefficient, the back office inefficient, and your margins are compressed.
Yeah, that's great insight. You can have all the best tools in the world, but if they're not used by the folks who need to use them, then it's kind of all for naught. All right. Another question here says, can the field data gathering solution be integrated with another production accounting system, or is it strictly tied into W production accounting?
No, we can tie into any production accounting system. We actually have customers that do that. So you can use our APIs to connect to anything else you need to. Obviously, the benefit we have is we have the real-time allocations, but it's usually a lot harder to the undertaking of replacing a production accounting system versus just the field side of it. So that's definitely an option, and a lot of companies approach it that way.
All right. Another one is, can you integrate with outside systems like a SCADA or an EAM solution?
Yes, again, just same thing, back to the APIs. We can integrate with just about anything. We've even seen integrations with custom solutions that customers have where they have their own algorithms, and based on those algorithms triggering a value, they want to call the join APIs and create a task or trigger an event and join. So you can do that. And like I talked about, we can often be the front end of an SAP or an Oracle or something like that, field facing. So that's also using APIs. SCADA is similar.
Oh, very good. We have a question on if there's any is there a best order to implement these three tools if they were looking to make a holistic change to a solution like this?
I think it just depends where you think you'll get your best return, and by where your pain points are. If you feel your operations folks are just busy collecting a lot of manual data multiple times on different interfaces, then the field data capture is probably the place to start. If you feel that's not a pain point, but you are already feeling pain in getting operations and maintenance and all those tasks aligned on the same page, and just faster cycle time that you're looking at, then you can start with field service management. So we've had customers start on either side, and some do both at the same time, but they're more targeted in their scope of what they want to achieve. That way they can get to success faster.
Yeah, certainly several things to take into consideration there for customers of what they're looking to achieve. All right. What about, here we have one that asks if we have any use cases for leak detection that you can talk about.
Yeah, so generally emissions, AVOs, leak detection, we have multiple customers using the platform on either side, whether they're just collecting data on the FDG side, or whether they're collecting data and maintaining and fixing things on the field service side. I'd say one of the cooler ones that I've seen recently is we have a customer who is using the APIs again, talking about the integration to things like SCADA. In this case, they are integrating from a field sensor that detects a leak. And when it does, it talks to its cloud, and its cloud talks to the W cloud, and kicks off a task to dispatch an operator or a technician to go fix the leak. Similarly, another use case is the client is flying drones over their assets, and the drone sees a leak. It identifies what battery or what location in the system the leak is at. It will then pass that information over to W, and then that will dispatch a task for somebody in the field to go look at that area as well. So those are some of the cooler leak detection / emission type of use cases that I've seen recently.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that's coming into more prominence over the last few years of automating a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think we've got.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I think it's not that drones are new or sensors are new. These things have always been out there for a few years, but having that closed loop in a system that is field facing has been what's missing. So I think that's where we're seeing the key value is being able to leverage all of those investments you've made and now actually get value out of them by connecting the people in the field to them versus it stopping at a control room and then turning into a text message or something like that.
That makes sense. Right. I think, Shrivan, we've got time for one more question here. Are you using in these solutions, or do you have plans of using or implementing any of the new kind of AI tech that's out there, any of the large language models, things like that? Or how's that coming into play with the tools like these?
Yeah, so yes, short answer is yes. However, one thing we want to be cognizant about as while we are, piloting some of these things is, we don't want to rush to market with just a sticker that says AI on the product, right? So, AI is not going to be our differentiator, but AI with the right data model is going to be a huge value to our customers. So we just want to make sure that whatever we put the AI on, LLMs is something we're looking at. So, the use cases we're thinking of is we have all of this data. Well, if I've sent a guy out to fix a compressor 3 times or 4 times in the last, few months, if I send out another task like that, either the technician or the engineer, whoever is involved, it would be cool if they could just ask the question, whether it's on their mobile app or on the web application. Hey, tell me what happened the last time we fixed this compressor, or last 3 times we fixed this compressor, or tell me across all the compressors, how many times have we had this problem, right? And then letting the LLM go and figure out, sort through the data and come up with a summary that they can be more informed about whether they're making the right repair or not, whether there's any best practices hidden in that data, whether they can garner any further insights, or whether just by reading that, doing the same repair, whether they can change things moving forward in terms of how they operate compressors or rotating equipment or valves or ESPs or ESDs, whatever it might be. But having some of that contextual knowledge also available using something like an LLM and an AI data model, that's kind of what we're looking at and headed towards, and hopefully can come out with something pretty soon.
Well, awesome. Sounds like you're really, leading in looking at a lot of those technologies that are available out there to only further improve the capabilities that operators can utilize to get some of that real-time data. So I think that is our last question for today. If we were unable to get to your question, Shrivan or I will be able to follow up with you after the fact. Shrivan, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we will conclude the webinar.